So I'm in central Bendigo, and if you've ever had a look around here, we're kind of blessed with a lot of classical architecture. Look, here's a guy being attacked by a mountain lion that has a dog chewing its neck. If you know the story behind this one, please, in the comments, because I've always wondered. We're blessed with quite a selection of sort of classical sculpture. Look, there's another one. King George is over here. The crown of these, though, is the Alexandra Fountain, which is the great big fountain in the middle of town. And I would have shot this down there, but it's way too noisy with the traffic. It's in what's known as Charing Cross, which was a sort of a town square for Bendigo for a long time. It's been taken over by the roads and the volume of traffic that goes through these days. But in the middle is a great big beautiful fountain. Come and have a look and I'll show you. So the Alexandra Fountain was unveiled in 1881. It was partly funded by the proceeds of the Bendigo Industrial Exhibition in 1879, which is a great big thing. They went on to showcase the mining in Bendigo. It was also funded by a £500 gift from mining magnate George Lancel, as well as a £700 contribution from the city of Sandhurst, as Bendigo was known at the time. The fountain was designed by local architect William Vahland, who would become quite a respected architect and a man who was responsible for many of the buildings around Bendigo in the era. And it has to be said, it is a stunningly beautiful fountain. So the question I always ask when I see the fountain, and I'm a little bit different, I do acknowledge, is how they make it work. Where did the water come from? Because it's quite an old fountain. So I'll pass over to Whiteboard Ben, who's going to explain. Okay, let me explain what I mean. Here's our fountain. I'm not the best drawer, bear with me. What we do today is we have a sump. You have your fountain, water sprays out, it collects in here. We have a nice little clean, efficient electric pump that takes some water out of the bottom, puts under pressure, pumps it back up. Your fountain doesn't look much like a fountain, I know. Sprays out the top, collects again, gets pumped around in a circle, bada bing, bada boom, easy. Now, the problem with this fountain was it was built in the 1880s and nice, clean, efficient electric pumps weren't available. We didn't have a power grid. So to actively pump it, they would have had to use another technology. A windmill doesn't seem to make sense. There's no pictures of a windmill anywhere near it. Would only work when the wind's blowing. Or a steam-driven pump. Now, they wouldn't have done a steam-driven pump because that would have required a steam engine, a pump, an engineer to run it, and someone to stoke coal. And it would be a very inefficient way. Quite capable of pumping water with steam, and they did it quite regularly in the mines. But for this purpose, I can't imagine them doing that, and I can't find any evidence they did that. I can't find any pictures of an old steam engine next to the fountain. It would be very inefficient, right? So they didn't do that. Now, you might be going, well, maybe they just plumbed into the water supply, and maybe they did. I don't know for sure, but Bendigo is very limited water supply. Basically, Bendigo had only the little creek, which dries up almost completely in summer, is the only natural supply of water in Bendigo. It's in a valley, and we're right up the top of that valley, so there's very little rainfall collecting into that waterway. It wasn't until the 1870s they dug a huge channel that runs about 70 kilometres from Lauriston to take water into Bendigo. Now, the channel is only sort of a metre and a half wide, and the entire town's water supply comes from that. So water was still limited. And still pretty precious. And I don't think they would have used the precious water just to run through the fountain to dump into the creek and lose. It would have been a big percentage of what was coming into the town at the time. So I think they had another source. It could have been gravity fed. So as you know, this sits next to the Bendigo Creek. And perhaps they've had a water supply either up on one of the sides of the valley that's gravity fed down into the fountain. And this is what I think they did do, but we don't know. The other option is they might have dammed the creek, upstream enough to have a little reservoir where the water collected and then pipe that down under pressure to the fountain. So further back up the creek. They might have done that. They would have still been at the mercy of the creek's water flow. But remember, the fountain might not have actually had a huge water supply. It might not have needed heaps of water to still look okay. A trickle coming over the side would still look pretty good. So they might have done that and just let it run. They also may not have run this thing all the time. It might have just been put on for show now and then. I don't know. I have a few theories. I don't actually know the answer, so at the end of this, we're going to do the research. We're going to hop on the computer. I think the answer will be there in some of the archives and some of the old newspaper cuttings. We'll see if we can find it. But let's have a look at the evidence. One thing I want to do is, the Bendigo Creek runs right next to the fountain, but it's hidden. It's actually the other side. It's hidden in a culvert or a bridge. Let's see if there's anything underneath that might give us some hints as to how this was done originally. Some urban exploring. I'm very much a law-abiding person, and this kind of feels like I'm breaking some rules. I don't think I actually am, but anyway, here we are. We're in the creek. You never used to have these fences, so it actually used to be pretty easy to get into. Some pretty cool old stonework. Look at that. Across the other side where I'm less obvious. There's no one around. One of the first things the city of Bendigo, Sandhurst as it was then, did was to put the creek into a channel, straighten it out, make some space. And at some stage, they put a giant bridge, I guess you could call it a culvert, over the creek to make a square in the middle, which is Charing Cross where the fountain is. So I've never been under here, despite living most of my life in this town. So let's find out what it's like. Right now, how good Bendigo's water supply is in summer. We're halfway through February, and that's it. The other side. Can't believe I've never done this. It's the back of the City Family Hotel here. No chance a crackhead attack is. Didn't expect it to be divided into channels. That's quite big. So if we're interested in the fountain, we need to be in the right-hand way. Just looking for your friends. Wow, isn't this exciting? Okay. A bit more modern on the right there, no longer stone. So the roof here looks quite modern. Concrete everywhere. Brickwork here is probably quite old. Okay, so this is about the distance I'd expect the fountain. Oh, you see that's cracked open, there's nothing going through there. Let's have a look the rest of the way. That's quite old, isn't it? Yep. Oh, hello. So I'll leave you guys alone. Chicks. So this is quite old. I don't know where this music's coming from. And this is the other end of Roslyn Park. So I did some measurements. Queen Victoria up there, War Memorial. 60 metres to approximately what we want. 30, 31. 60. So, by dead reckoning, this is about the edge of the fountain. It should be up over here somewhere. Might be a little off. We do have a couple of pipes. This one obviously looks more modern at this end. But this has some quite old, original era brickwork in it. So maybe. I guess we should walk through the other pipe just for completeness since we're going back that way. Again, much older drains behind the concrete. So I had sort of hoped that more of the original infrastructure would be intact, and it was probably, in hindsight, a little naive of me. I sort of hoped we'd see the old Victorian era roofing and structure for the top of the bridge, and we might see some pipes and stuff in there. Reality is it's been upgraded because that would have been enough for modern traffic. But obviously this roof is reinforced concrete. I don't know when they did that. You can see some of the original cobblestones underneath the concrete. I guess this was lined with shotcrete just to protect it. And this is the edge of the City Family Hotel. And that's it. There's really not much to see down here. So, we'll move on. It's not sus at all. I'm just walking through the creek. Nice day for a walk. Let's see if the old man can get up this. Actually, I got my doubts. There is another way out, so I just got to walk further. You won't make this. Here we go. Yeah. few steps, I stopped looking sus and I'm just another person walking down the street. Okay, so one of the things you've got to consider is that the Alexandra Fountain wasn't meant to exist in isolation. Lancel and Valon had this idea that they wanted to create a sort of triangle of water features that could be seen right across the centre of Bendigo. So if we go on the top of Roslyn Park, we've got this feature, and this is the Cascade.
Check this out, it is very beautiful. Very beautiful, it is quite beautiful. So when these trees weren't 150 years old, you could see through directly to the Alexandra Fountain here and across to the Valon Fountain, which we'll have a look at in a sec. From any one of those points, you could see the other two, and it was a sign of reference, and it was a nod to some of the architecture in a lot of European cities at the time. The story goes that George Lancel actually did a grand tour. He did his trip to Europe and toured the major capitals and had a look at the architecture there. And if you've ever been to Paris, it's very reminiscent of the sort of lines of symmetry they have between different points in the city and there, and a few other European cities as well. Pretty cool feature, actually. I can't imagine it had this much water going over it. That's in the 1800s.
So let's walk along the Cascade here. As you see, even today, the council's only running water through the very bottom section of the whole thing. I know they're capable, or at least in the past, I've seen them run water through the whole thing, which looks amazing, but kind of highlights probably how much work it is to maintain the whole thing and how much energy and effort's needed. I'm just being careful here. Obviously, don't walk through fountains like I do. Do what I say, not what I do. The quartz on the side, I'm sure, is a nod to the mining heritage and the quartz gold mining that went on in Bendigo. I've seen this fountain in some early images of the Cascade, so let me just show you here. It's pretty cool to have a look at that. Yeah, check that out. Righto, enough of that. And a little bit of a pan here, that's pretty good. All right, up we go. The top of this cascade is right at the top of the hill, so the water that came to the top wasn't getting gravity fed from anywhere. But I think that pool at the bottom was probably the header tank for the pressure that goes to the two fountains below. So could use a little cleanup today. And this is the very top section. You can imagine in summer, like where there was no air conditioning, a bit of mist and water coming off the fountain, this would have been a cool place to be, to come out, a bit of a breeze coming through. Not many chances probably to cool down in summer in Australia in the 1880s. Now, let's have a look up the tower and see if I can show you where this line of symmetry is. Here we go. Huh. All right, that's as far as we get. Top of the Cascade. We're right on top of the hill here. The Bendigo Bank is that grey building through there, the edge of it. The fountain is just there, the Alexandra Fountain. Vahland's fountain's down there. It's technically behind the old courthouse building now, but it's not actually in its original location. And this is the last one here. This is the Valon drinking fountain. Now, it's not quite in its original position. It was down the street in the middle of the high street. Or Pall Mall it is here. But in the middle of the road. But we lost this one for a while too. It was decommissioned at some point. Probably the same time as the Cascade, but I don't know. And it was only reconstructed recently. It was in a council shed somewhere. Brought out and put it back, and I can't help noticing it's also dry and has no water flowing through it. But also a lovely piece of architecture. So the lamps at the top were gas lit originally. Like I said, it was just at a slightly different location further down in the middle of the road. The different troughs around were actually for drinking water for animals, and the higher ones were for people. So this picture's from 1905, and the Easter procession's just finished, and down the bottom corner you can see the fountain at its original spot. So my theory is the water came out of a mine. This is Common Hill Primary School. Down the very back of that was a mine. It's quite a deep one, and I reckon they were taking the water out of that mine, they were pumping out of that mine. It goes well below the water table, so they would have been actively pumping water. I think they fed it to the top of the Cascade, and from there it went to the other two fountains. That's my theory. We'll go into the paperwork now and we'll see if I'm right. Okay, so it seems I was a little bit right, which is to say I was mostly wrong. The long story short is it came from the town water supply. There was nothing else going on. And probably drinking fountains should have been a clue, because you're not going to pump water out of a mine, put it into a pipe and encourage the public to drink out of it. Should have thought of that. Okay, the story goes back to this exhibition. So Bendigo is a relatively new city, found a lot of money in the mining. It was wealthy. They were doing mining techniques that were unique in the world. They had some huge mine shafts, lots going on. Had an exhibition to showcase what was happening and to promote Bendigo businesses and Bendigo in general. Part of that, the centerpiece for that, was a fountain designed by Vahland again, and it was the centerpiece of the whole exhibition. And it is the fountain that's at the base of the Cascade. So it predates everything else. It was what was there first. It ran off town water through a pipe, a 3-inch pipe apparently. Anyway, basically, after the exhibition, they had all this money. They had about £900. And there was a meeting where Lancel comes into them and puts forward his proposal. He wants to build a cascade that goes from the top of the hill, goes down essentially what we've seen, was the exact proposal, then into a new sort of backing for that fountain that was already there, sheds into that, and then from there, that water goes down to a brand new fountain at Charing Cross. The one bit I was right about. So, the proposal is sort of lukewarm. It meets with a bit of resistance and a few other ideas. There's a few other suggestions put forward for the money. There's a fairly popular notion that they should put an illuminated town clock in place, which would benefit anyone. Someone suggests they buy an organ. It's not sure where this organ was to go, but if you think about organs as the pinnacle of technology at the time, it's not actually that far off. And music sort of played a different role in their society. It was much more of a thing for most people. But anyway, the fountain idea gains weight, and in it there's a mention of putting a lamp down the other end of Pall Mall, a gas lamp, to illuminate it better. So it goes forward, it gets some council support, and the next thing we see is a report from the surveyor, the town surveyor, who's going, yeah, look, it's feasible, we could do it this way, but the water consumption is going to be horrendous. It's going to use tons and tons of water, and it may compromise our ability to actually run fire hydrants in some of the higher parts of town where the pressure's lower. And he's got some concerns about it, and this is picked up on the public. there's a few letters to the editor going, should we really be doing this? This seems like a big lot of money for something that's going to compromise things. He also suggests, and I can't find any record of whether it happens or not, but he suggests the water goes down the Cascade, it goes to the Alexandra Fountain, as it would be known, and then there's a public bath. Bath Lane, there was a public bath, and that public bath was already taking many thousands of litres a day from the water supply. So his suggestion was we run it to the fountain and then to the bath, which could be done. And that way it would sort of supplement the water. The water they were using, they could repeat and sort of offset what they were already losing. So that was his proposal. Never find out if they actually did it, but it seemed to make sense and it seemed to have support. So there's a good chance they did. There's very little mention of the Valon drinking fountain. It suffers that sort of little brother sort of syndrome where the Alexandra Fountain gets all the attention and you just don't hear about it. But it seems the idea went from a lamppost to a drinking fountain, and we ended up with the fountain we've got. Like I said, it wasn't that position. It was sort of more at the end of Mundy Street in Howard Place down there. But that's it. Basically, the whole thing ran off the town water supply for better or worse. There you go. That's what happened. So we're left with these three quite amazing water features, some really pretty and amazing fountains, and quite an appropriate legacy for Lancel, for Vahland, and for the pioneers who had some vision to throw some money at something cool. I mean, if it was a clock tower, we wouldn't be talking about it now, would we? All right. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed.